The Democratic People's Republic of Korea says it will ditch all non-aggression pacts with the South. That is after the United Nations Security Council announced further sanctions over its recent nuclear test. China, the North's only major ally, said all sides should continue to talk and further avoid escalation. But Pyongyang had threatened a possible nuclear attack. Let's get more on these developments, and joining me now with more is Jim Walsh, an expert in international security and research associate at MIT. He is also one of a few Americans who have traveled to the DPRK and Iran for nuclear talks with officials. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Jim, I want to ask you this. How do you see these latest threats by the DPRK playing out? Could it get worse once Pyongyang starts feeling the effects from these new sanctions?
Well, I think the effect of the sanctions, there'll be some effect, but it's not going to be a game changer. We've had lots of sanctions resolutions. If there were a set of sanctions that would magically solve this problem, I think we would have already passed them by now. And so I think the sanctions will, they'll be costly in some ways, they'll be inconvenient, but they're not going to fundamentally change North Korean behavior. That behavior has been more acerbic. All of us who watch that country are used to pretty tough rhetoric, but in the last 2 months, it's gotten quite pointed in ways that I've not really seen before. That's the bad news. The good news is it's still rhetoric, and they haven't acted on this rhetoric. And in fact, all the provocations they've made, including the nuclear test, by the way, don't actually involve anyone else. They're not attacking anyone like they attacked the Cheonan or had that island shelling. They're not actually doing violence to anyone. These are all provocations that don't actually directly affect people. So that's the good news on it. I still think it's a dangerous situation, though. There's not much communication. There's a lot of new players, a lot of new people who are in office for the first time. So I think it's a very delicate situation.
Well, that being said, do you anticipate the DPRK following through on some sort of military threat? Because you have a new leader now, Kim Jong-un. Is he out there to make a name for himself?
Well, I think certainly he's out there to consolidate his power. That's the first job of any leader in office of a country, is to make sure that your position is solid. So I think some of these military actions, provocations, threats may actually be more about domestic politics than foreign policy. In North Korea, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell what's going on at all. I don't think they're likely to engage in a direct military provocation. They know that South Korea's military is stronger. They know that the U.S. military is stronger. Combined, they're far stronger. So I think what they're trying to do is be provocative, but just below the threshold where this would lead to a direct confrontation. The question is, will they continue to do that? Will they make a mistake? Will someone mess up? And then we might end up in a war that nobody wants.
Well, again, I guess we'll have to wait and see, because we have someone in there we really haven't heard or known much about up until, about a year ago. Do you think the DPRK will heed China's advice to calm the situation, which it's been putting out there this week? Obviously the DPRK can't really afford to disregard what China is saying.
Yeah, you'd think so, right? Because China's its supporter. It's a far more powerful country. And yet the North Koreans ignored Chinese pressure and conducted the last missile test and the last nuclear test, contrary to what Beijing had asked them to do. Sometimes weaker powers in bizarre circumstances have more influence than their stronger benefactors. In this case, there's not a lot that China can do. I mean, it doesn't want to squeeze the DPRK because it doesn't want to have a problem state with refugees right on its border. And frankly, the Chinese and the North Koreans, for all the talk, don't actually get along that well. So I think China is a little frustrated right now. They would wish that North Korea would stop doing this because it's causing problems for China in the region, but it doesn't know quite how to go about trying to control North Korean behavior.
All right, Jim Walsh, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us from Massachusetts.